Adrian Blackwood settled into his first-class seat with the practiced efficiency of someone who spent more time in airports than in his own home. At 37, he was the CEO of Blackwood Consulting, a firm he'd built from nothing into one of the most successful business strategy companies in the country. He had everything he'd worked for: wealth, influence, respect in every boardroom he entered. What he didn't have was a reason to stop working. No family waiting for him, no one calling to ask when he'd be home. His parents had passed away years ago, and he'd never found time for marriage or children. Romance required presence, attention, vulnerability, things Adrian had long ago decided were luxuries he couldn't afford while building an empire. The red-eye flight from New York to San Francisco was nearly empty in first class. Adrian had chosen it specifically for that reason. 6 hours of uninterrupted work time, no small talk with chatty seatmates, just him and his laptop and the quarterly reports that never seemed to end. He was pulling out his computer when he heard a small voice beside him. "You look tired." "Sir?" Adrian turned to find a little girl standing in the aisle, maybe 4 years old, with strawberry blonde hair in a ponytail and wearing a pink dress. She carried a small green backpack decorated with cartoon animals and looked at him with the kind of direct, unfiltered honesty that only children possess. "I'm fine, thank you," Adrian said politely, glancing around for a parent or guardian. The seat next to him was empty, and the row behind was vacant as well. "My grandma says people who work too much get tired eyes," the little girl continued, studying his face with serious consideration. "You have tired eyes?" Despite himself, Adrian smiled slightly. "Your grandmother sounds very wise. Where is she?" "She's in heaven," the girl said matter-of-factly. "She went there last month. Now it's just me and Mommy." Adrian's chest tightened at the casual way she delivered this information, as if discussing the weather. "I'm sorry to hear that." "It's okay," the girl said. "Grandma said she'd always watch over us." "Do you believe in that? People watching from heaven?" Before Adrian could answer, a flight attendant approached with a young woman in tow. The woman looked exhausted, her blonde hair pulled back hastily, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying recently. She wore jeans and a simple sweater and carried a well-worn bag. "Sophie, you can't just wander off," the woman said, relief and exasperation mixing in her voice. She looked at Adrian apologetically. "I'm so sorry." She slipped away while I was putting our bags in the overhead compartment. "I hope she wasn't bothering you." "She wasn't," Adrian said, and found he meant it. "We were just having a conversation." "I told him he has tired eyes," Sophie announced proudly. "Like Grandma said about people who work too much." The woman's cheeks flushed. "Sophie, that's not polite to say to strangers." "But it's true, Mommy," Sophie protested. "You always say we should tell the truth." "Your seats are back here, ma'am," the flight attendant said, gesturing to the economy section. "Wait," Adrian heard himself say. "How would you and your daughter like to sit up here instead?" "I have the row to myself and there's plenty of room." The woman's eyes widened. "We couldn't possibly—" "I'm inviting you," Adrian interrupted gently. Besides, Sophie and I were in the middle of an important philosophical discussion about heaven. It would be rude to interrupt it now. The flight attendant looked uncertain, but Adrian pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, the upgrade was arranged, and Sophie and her mother were settling into the seats next to him. "I'm Charlotte Hayes," the woman said, offering her hand. "And you've already met Sophie, who apparently has no filter when it comes to commenting on strangers' appearances." "Adrian Blackwood," he replied, shaking her hand. "And she's right. I do have tired eyes. I've been working around the clock for the past 3 months." "What do you do?" Charlotte asked as Sophie occupied herself with pulling coloring books from her backpack. "I run a consulting firm. We help companies improve their business strategies. It's demanding work, lots of travel, long hours." "Sounds lonely," Charlotte said softly, and something in her tone suggested she knew what loneliness felt like. "It is," Adrian admitted, surprised at his own honesty. "But it's what I chose. What about you?" Over the next hour, as the plane leveled off and night darkened the windows, Adrian learned Charlotte's story. She'd been living with her mother in New York, working as a freelance graphic designer from home so she could help care for her mom, who'd been battling cancer. Her mother had passed away a month ago, and Charlotte was moving to San Francisco to start fresh, to find steady work and give Sophie a new beginning away from the apartment filled with memories of loss. "I'm terrified," Charlotte confessed, her voice barely above a whisper so Sophie wouldn't hear. "I have a little savings and a few freelance clients, but I don't have a job lined up yet. I don't know anyone in San Francisco. It's just me and Sophie against the world." "That takes incredible courage," Adrian said. "Or incredible stupidity," Charlotte replied with a sad laugh. "I'm not sure which yet." Sophie, who had been coloring quietly, suddenly looked up at Adrian. "Do you have a family, Mr. Adrian?" "Sophie," Charlotte warned, but Adrian held up a hand. "It's okay." "No, Sophie, I don't have a family. It's just me." "That's sad," Sophie said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Everyone needs a family, even if it's small. Me and Mommy are a small family, but we're still a family." "You're right," Adrian said, feeling something crack in his chest. "That is sad." "You could be our friend," Sophie suggested. "Friends are almost like family." "Sophie, Mr. Blackwood is a busy man," Charlotte said gently. "I'm sure he has important things to do when we land." Adrian looked at this little girl who'd called out his exhaustion within seconds of meeting him, and at her mother who was bravely starting over with nothing but hope and determination. He thought about his empty penthouse in San Francisco, about the work that would still be there tomorrow regardless of whether he did it tonight. "Actually," Adrian said slowly, "I don't have anything important scheduled. And I know San Francisco well. If you'd like, I could help you get settled, show you around a bit, maybe help with recommendations for neighborhoods, schools for Sophie." Charlotte looked uncertain. "That's very kind, but we couldn't impose—" "You're not imposing. I'm offering. Consider it a welcome wagon committee of one." The truth was, Adrian hadn't felt this present, this engaged in years. Something about this woman's quiet strength and her daughter's unfiltered wisdom had woken something in him that he'd thought was long dead. Over the remaining hours of the flight, Sophie fell asleep with her head on Adrian's arm, completely trusting in the way children sometimes are. Charlotte apologized, but Adrian found he didn't mind. When was the last time anyone had needed him for something other than business advice? "She doesn't usually warm up to people this quickly," Charlotte said, looking at her sleeping daughter with tender concern. "She's been so withdrawn since my mom died. But with you, she just opened right up. Maybe she senses I needed someone to tell me I have tired eyes," Adrian said with a slight smile. When they landed in San Francisco, Adrian did something he'd never done before. He cleared his schedule for the entire day. He helped Charlotte and Sophie get their luggage, drove them to the temporary housing Charlotte had arranged, and then spent the day showing them the city. He took them to breakfast at a family-friendly diner where Sophie demolished a stack of pancakes. He drove them through different neighborhoods, pointing out parks and libraries and good schools. He helped Charlotte understand the public transportation system and showed her where the best grocery stores were. "Why are you doing all this?" Charlotte asked as they sat in Golden Gate Park, watching Sophie chase pigeons in the afternoon sun. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure," Adrian admitted. "Yesterday, if you'd asked me to take a day off work to help strangers get acclimated to the city, I would have said it was impossible. But sitting on that plane, hearing Sophie say I had tired eyes, something clicked. She was right. I've been exhausted for years, working nonstop, and for what? To have more money I don't spend? To build a bigger company I run alone? Still," Charlotte pressed, "this is beyond kind. You don't even know us." "Maybe that's exactly why," Adrian said. "Because you don't want anything from me except help. You don't know who I am or what I'm worth. Sophie talked to me like I was just a tired person who needed someone to notice. When's the last time anyone saw me as just a person?" Over the following weeks, Adrian found himself making excuses to see Charlotte and Sophie. He helped Charlotte set up her home office, connected her with potential clients through his business network, and introduced her to people who could help her establish herself professionally. But more than that, he became part of their small family. He attended Sophie's first day at her new preschool. He showed up for dinner with takeout when Charlotte was overwhelmed with a project deadline. He read bedtime stories to Sophie, doing different silly voices that made her laugh until she got hiccups. "You're different than you were on the plane," Charlotte observed one evening after Sophie had fallen asleep. They were sitting on her small balcony, the city lights twinkling below them. "How so?" Adrian asked. "You smile now. Real smiles, not the polite ones you probably use in business meetings. And your eyes aren't as tired." "That's because I've cut my work hours in half," Adrian admitted. "My business partners thought I'd lost my mind. But I realized Sophie was right that first day. I was tired because I was living wrong. I was existing instead of actually living." "Adrian, I need to tell you something," Charlotte said, her voice serious. "Sophie and I were not a charity project. I appreciate everything you've done for us, but I won't let you help us out of some kind of obligation or guilt." "Is that what you think this is?" Adrian asked, turning to face her. "Charlotte, helping you and Sophie, spending time with you both, it's been the most meaningful thing I've done in years. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that?" "A reason to leave work on time. A reason to care about something beyond the next deal. A family, even if it's not official. Even if it started with a little girl telling me I looked tired on a plane." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "We care about you too. Sophie talks about you constantly. She asked me yesterday if you could be her daddy." "What did you tell her?" Adrian asked, his heart racing. "I told her that relationships are complicated, that we need to take things slowly. But Adrian, I need you to be honest with me. Are you here because you genuinely care about us, or because we're filling some void in your life?" "Both," Adrian answered honestly. "You do fill a void I didn't want to admit existed. But Charlotte, that doesn't make my feelings less genuine. I care about Sophie like she's my own daughter, and I've fallen in love with you in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. You're brave and strong, and you've shown me what really matters in life." "I'm scared," Charlotte whispered. "I've been on my own for so long, making every decision alone, protecting Sophie from disappointment. What if this doesn't work? What if you realize we're too much responsibility, too much baggage?" "You're not baggage," Adrian said firmly. "You're a gift. One I don't deserve, but am grateful for every single day." 6 months later, Adrian proposed not in an expensive restaurant or exotic location, but in the same park where he'd watched Sophie chase pigeons on their first day in San Francisco. Sophie was in on the plan, holding the ring box and barely able to contain her excitement. When Charlotte said yes through happy tears, Sophie threw her arms around both of them and declared, "Now we're a real family. And Mr. Adrian's eyes aren't tired anymore." She was right. Adrian's eyes weren't tired anymore because he'd finally found something worth staying awake for. A little girl who'd seen his exhaustion, and a woman who'd taught him that success without connection is just an expensive kind of loneliness. At their wedding, Sophie served as flower girl, and in his vows, Adrian thanked her for telling a stranger he looked tired, for caring enough about someone she didn't know to speak a truth he'd been hiding from himself. "Sometimes the most important words we hear come from the smallest voices," Adrian said, looking at Sophie with love. "And sometimes the family we're meant to have finds us on a plane at midnight, offering us something we didn't know we desperately needed. The truth, spoken with compassion, and the invitation to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Because that's what Sophie had given him. Not just an observation about tired eyes, but an invitation to stop running, to rest, to join the small family that was willing to let a stranger in and show him what life could be when you finally stopped working and started living. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that sometimes our greatest transformations begin with simple observations from unlikely sources, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories about unexpected families, finding purpose beyond success, and the courage to change our lives when someone shows us a better way. Comment below about a time when a child's innocent words opened your eyes to something important, or about finding family in unexpected places. Sometimes the smallest voices deliver the biggest truths.